All right. Well, good morning, everyone. We're very happy to have our guest speakers with us today. Let's see if I can open my, there we go. We have Dr. Amy Michael and Dr. Laura Norton with us today as our guest speakers. So I'm going to introduce them briefly before they get into their talk for the pro seminar today. So Dr. Michael is an assistant professor of anthropology at the University of New Hampshire. She's a biological anthropologist interested in gender identity and diversity in forensic casework, human bone and tooth histology, search and recovery methods in northern New England, and collaborative approaches to resolving unidentified cold cases. Dr. Michael has worked on archaeological field projects in the United States, Belize, and Albania, and she's increasingly working with experts outside of anthropology to investigate challenging cases with long post-mortem intervals, gender diverse decedents, and few remaining skeletal elements for analysis. Dr. Laura Norton is a former English professor, researcher, and a writer of creative nonfiction and fiction who has been working in podcasting for 5 years. Dr. Norton moved from academia research and writing to a concentration on cold cases after her introduction to the case of the Millbrook twins who disappeared in Augusta, Georgia in 1990. Since then, she has concentrated much of her work on unidentified persons, forensic science, and ways to improve coverage of cold cases for families and victims across the United States. She is currently working on her first book, tentatively scheduled for publication in fall 2023. Yay, that will be very exciting. And without further ado, you are both welcome to start when you're ready.
All right, thank you, Dr. Burns. I'm just trying to make sure can everyone see my shared PowerPoint?
I can see it.
Great. Okay, so thank you for that introduction. Thank you for having us both. This is exciting. We're talking to a pro seminar class. I see a couple of names that are this morning. So let's just get right into it. I'm going to advance the slides for both myself and Laura. So Laura, just like shout at me when you're ready for me to click on over for you.
Okay.
But I'll try to be aware. Oh, great. Now I can't. Now I got to figure out how to click on my end. Here we go. Just warning at the top of the hour here, your students in the room are all familiar with this, but we do just want to make it known that we're going to show up with some a dental radiograph and a slide that our friend Sam Blatt made of a tooth, and then a photo or an image that has already been published in JFS too. So, but just a warning, and I'll try to remember to do the warning again before the slide pops up. So, Dr. Burns gave us a nice intro, but we wanted to sort of contextualize ourselves and our work a little bit more, especially why we're talking together and how we have kind of created this research team together. So I would identify as a biological anthropologist who mostly does forensic anthropology right now. I haven't done bioarch in quite a while. And I'll let Laura do her spiel in a second. But I would reiterate here before we kind of get into how we work together that we became friends and research colleagues because we had these shared common interests in cold cases that sort of had these hallmarks of identified difficult cases, marginalized people during life, that continued marginalization and death. And we started to recognize through our conversations with each other that our personal areas of expertise could really complement each other's areas. Laura is a creative writer. I am like a very non-creative scientist, but we realized that together, of course, we were interested in the same types of cases, and we started to talk about how we might be able to help each other work toward the common goals of prioritizing those cases both in our own areas of signal boosting those cases too, to folks that we thought could help with their areas of expertise. So we began working together with Laura, asking me to consult on some cases that were featured on her very popular and very good, my personal opinion, podcast, The Fall Line, and then we progressed to finding cases to identify together. So we'll talk to you about one that we worked on at the close of this presentation, but I will send it over to Laura to share any more that she wants to about this, our initial
I was,
working together.
Oh, I'm sorry. You froze. Yeah, you're doing the New Hampshire thing. Usually it's only when the snow's there. So is it, I'm a writer and researcher. That's what I am. And I was an English professor up until just a few months ago. So I'm still recovering from academia. And I would say I'm a podcaster kind of by accident. It's just the most immediate way to access a way to share this information with people. And I really love teaching podcasting to my students because it's an accessible way to get information out to a lot of people really quickly. It doesn't have a lot of the same barriers that academic publishing does, that my field of publishing does, creative writing, very expensive as well. And that's how I kind of fell into that. And there are a lot of hurdles, especially in true crime podcasting, which comes with a lot of stigma. To getting people to want to talk to you, who are experts, who are families, and whether those experts are law enforcement or experts in the scientific side of things. So meeting Amy, and we just had a lot of things in common, both in the field and outside of the field, and becoming friends and finding that we had the same research interest has been really exciting and really invigorating for me. And finding out that when we work together, we can actually do casework in a more effective way has been really exciting as well. So.
Laura, do you want to explain the Jenkins County Jane Doe case just briefly? Because I want to say this is the first one you ever contacted me about.
Yeah, sure. We actually just re-released our episode on this case with a remaster and combining it down into one episode because of some just crazy web sleuthing that was going on. But the Jenkins County Jane Doe is a South Georgia case, and this was actually the first case when we began to work with the GBI here in Georgia. And so that's going to be the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. That's our state agency. And this was our first chance to get media clearance with the state agency, which is a big deal. If you've ever worked in media, getting the state agency to give you clearance means that you get to go into the office. We got to go through her files and interview some of the agents who'd worked on her case as well. But we were really interested in working on the Jenkins County Jane Doe because there was no information available on her case in media. So this sketch is done by Marla Lawson of the GBI. She was the first woman who worked in forensic art in the South. So she was the first state agent that female forensic artist in the South at the time. And that sketch was all that was released for a really long time. This NCMEC sketch that came out, composite rather, that came out later, which much later. But to get access to any information on the case beyond what was in the files, I mean, I had to use university materials like ordering microfiche. This was before the pandemic, so they could actually get stuff in. Ordering microfiche, having it sent to the university, little tiny newspapers from all around South Georgia. And there were a couple of things about the case that I really needed help on. And some of it was understanding the skeletal analysis that was presented to me, because unfortunately it couldn't be redone. There couldn't be a new skeletal reanalysis done because she'd been cremated. And that was when I got in contact with some friends and said, do you know any forensic anthropologists or people who are practicing forensic anthropology who could help me? And they said, well, we do know someone in New Hampshire. And that's how I met Amy. And she was able to really walk me through the skeletal analysis and explain to me some of the practices in the 1980s and how they differed from how people are doing things today, and help me sort of traverse some of the language, and just got me so interested in the science of identification in a way that I hadn't been before. And that's sort of how our relationship developed.
So I will say, and Laura, please jump in on this at any moment, but I would say, based on the initial conversations that we had about Jenkins County Jane Doe, I was really interested in Laura's work too. You know, this was a field I had never really considered before. I really wasn't sure. To be honest, I was really turned off by a lot of them because, you know, they seemed a little like flippant and not serious, and their research didn't seem to be there. Part of that was my ignorance about what actually existed in that space. And part of it was because there are a lot of really bad true crime podcasts. So initially I was like, you know, talking to a podcaster, I don't know, like what if she takes my words out of context or something? And so, but it was really clear when we first started talking that Laura does serious, you know, investigative research and science. So we quickly started thinking about, you know, beyond Jenkins County Jane Doe, what are some other cases, especially where Laura's at in the Southeast, that could be of interest. And I believe that I don't exactly know when we started becoming friends, Laura. I want to say like 2019, 2018, something like that, pre-pandemic. Yeah. I don't know, the years blend pre and post pandemic, but pre-pandemic. And I had just moved to New Hampshire, so I wasn't doing a bunch of casework yet. Now, New Hampshire, and looking at other cases and looking at other people I could collaborate with. So this seemed like a really fortuitous meeting, and so I got interested in a couple cases in Georgia as well. But through those conversations, we realized that our areas of interest included, you know, looking at departments that had that were sort of resource poor in rural departments. I'm from a rural area in the Midwest. You know, I always had sort of a soft spot for, you know, looking at cases that didn't get a lot of media coverage, like the but also that were housed within departments that, you know, you could just sort of tell based on lack of resources that these cases hadn't been well investigated for a variety of reasons. But unfortunately, a lot of that always comes down to financials and labor power and all of that. And so we're both also interested in cases that have little coverage, you know, usually as a result of those resource poor jurisdictions. And in addition to the other things that might be kind of culturally at play too. I would say I really like challenging cases. Fragmentary conditions, you know, that are skeletonized or mummified. Cases where the case file is very scant. You know, we all want to see a nice big detailed case file. I would say in my experience, and I'm sure the other anthros in the room here would say the same, and I bet Laura would say the same too, that, you know, a lot of those cases with those long postmortem intervals, there's really not a lot of information remaining, or the case file or the incident report leaves a little to be desired. Both of us are interested in cases that have not even been entered into NamUs. I know that is definitely a problem. For plenty of reasons, some of which are intersecting cases. There are lots of skeletonized cases that don't even make it to NamUs up here, and so the job of that sort of falls on the anthropologists up here too, for better or worse. And of course, we're both interested in cases of sort of historically marginalized individuals. So I got really interested when I was working with Transdo Task Force a few years ago about forensic approximations here. The one on the right is an original sketch from 1978, and the left is the NCMEC reconstruction. And I started talking to Laura about Ina Jane Doe. Now, we should put John in quotation marks because there's some contextual evidence that this individual may have been transgender or gender diverse potentially. And this was an individual who was found very shortly after death. Still usually within I think the pathologist put it at, in 1978 in Georgia, in a train yard. And a year later, the man on the bottom, known as Putnam County John Doe, found in similar condition shortly after death. Blunt force trauma found also in the same train yard. So this is, you know, becoming a little, I'm sort of interested in this, right? They're actually buried side by side in paupers' graves, right, in a particular cemetery in Georgia. And so Laura did this, and then 2020 happened. So we sort of got derailed off of these cases and started looking elsewhere for some other cases. But it really is my hope that the GBI will take an interest in solving Eatonton John Doe and Putnam County John Doe. I don't know, Laura, do you want to add anything more about shared interests?
Yeah, just kind of like an additional point of how we work together. Amy is able to get on the phone and talk immediately to the medical examiners. And that art in the upper right corner, well, it's upper right to me, the black and white picture, that was done by Marla Lawson, the original artist from the GBI. So I was actually able to go over to her house and talk to her about the piece of art. She did, and she was able to talk to me about, she remembered doing the piece of art, and she was able to talk to me about the decedent and what she remembered about them and the details. And there were some things about the initial report that to her seemed not quite right, or she remembered a few more things because she has that kind of memory. So just being able to do those like on the spot interviews and that interpersonal kind of interview stuff that's a part of my work, I feel really adds some context and some layers to the work Amy and I do together.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. I mean, I think anthro students in the room can back me up here and say that that's just not that type of information is just not part of what we handle. And so I definitely want to underscore that Laura's ability to talk to families and talk to individuals like the forensic artist is a layer of information that otherwise I would never have had in any cases that I ever worked on. I want to say, Laura said all this nice stuff about me, and I do want to make it clear that I was hesitant at first. I alluded to it, but I want to make it clear that I was hesitant at first in collaborating with somebody outside of academia, even though Laura was in academia at the time when I met her, but she was in the English department. I was like, what is an English professor doing talking to me?
Always
but
maligned.
I think it's important. I think it's important to be transparent about this. And when I talk, I kind of told on myself at the beginning, right? Like, I was hesitant because I think during graduate school, and I did not go to UNLV. I'm sure UNLV is a great place where they encourage you to be, creative and all of this stuff. But when I was going to graduate school, I went from I took the the long path from 2006 to 2016. Yes, 10 years to graduate. That is my own fault. But I had a good graduate school experience, but there was, at the time that I was going, there was a fair amount of pressure to kind of like stay in your lane, right? You decide on a particular, research subset or skill set, and that's what you do. And certainly we didn't get trained to go track down cases and try to ask law enforcement to work on them or anything like that. It was more, of course, the cases would come to you because there was an established partnership with forensic. Once I graduated and I got my own series of jobs, and I started thinking like, well, I would like to sort of do other stuff that I want to collaborate with more people. I don't want to just do bone histology for the rest of my career, even though I love it. But I will say that, prior to meeting Laura, I had historically been collaborating with people still in academia, maybe like anthropology adjacent or something, like an anatomist or a dentist or something like that. So on the anthropology side of things, I would say, even if maybe not in graduate school, but maybe in your next, like in your professional job, I was wrong. Like I have had a fantastic, like, resurgence of like interest in my work because of my proximity to Laura and the work that we can do together. And I would say, I had a general distrust of or mistrust of media. I was thinking like, I don't know, like I said, I was a little hesitant about the podcasting stuff. I was totally wrong. I was worried that my words or my very kindly agreed to work with me on any of that. Sometimes I don't like say it all right the first time, and so I would say that if there's any like if you ever have the experience to work with a really talented researcher and writer like Laura or other people who are doing these great, really research heavy podcasts or books or whatever the case is, whatever the media form is. You know, my anthropology has gotten stronger through working collaborative. I would say, I will go on record, this is being recorded, that I was totally wrong, and collaboration really has been the best choice that I've made for my scholarship, and it's given us a lot of opportunities to do interesting cases. So when we think about situating our work in forensic cases, I would say that like we sort of we're good at like task lists, right? So both of us find cases and we do each other. And New Hampshire is keeping me very busy, but you know, the cases in New Hampshire tend to be of a certain type. And so I am still really interested, like we said a couple slides ago, about those other case types, you know, historically marginalized folks, really difficult cases, long postmortem intervals. So I just sent Laura a big list of 20 some odd cases that I'm really interested in around the country, and I wanted to see what she thought. Obviously the anthropology and the skeletal reanalysis and the kind of deciphering of that goes to me, and I'll let Laura, I'll toss this to Laura in a second to talk about the writing and researching, like how she initially starts that process. But I would say too, you know, in the interest of this theme of collaboration, we are both always trying to like gather outside experts to talk to and pick their brains about, you know, obviously genetic genealogists are doing an incredible amount of work in our field right now. Anatomists, we've made really good friends with an anatomist here in New Hampshire. He's great. The soft tissue that goes along with the skeletal information that I'm seeing, that, you know, I'm not a soft tissue expert, of course, so that's been really positive. We have secured a few great dentists that we can always collaborate on, and, you know, dentists are great. I'm sure, as you anthro students know, they always want to look at bones and teeth, and they always want to like take a cool pano x-ray for you and stuff. So that has been great. Forensic artists, you know, this is another thing that I will say, I will tell on myself, I was a naysayer about, but forensic artists, especially the ones that women working in Georgia, are phenomenal. And other researchers, we majorly incorporate our students into case research. They have newspaper.com accounts. They know how to use them. Laura has taught my students how to look for like death records and how to FOIA and all kinds of stuff. And actually, I'm very proud to say 2 of my students who graduated from UNH work for Laura doing paid research on her 2 podcasts. So that's sort of our process. And Laura, how you start the writing and researching potentially.
Sure. So it'll depend on where we are with the case. So hopefully we have made contact with the department, we've become friends with them, and we've just gotten a file. That's the best case scenario. Otherwise, I'm writing a FOIA. And when I'm writing a FOIA, did we miss a slide, Amy?
I don't think so. Maybe.
Okay. We did. Because
No,
I think there was.
I have. You know what? Actually, all of that is coming up. So if you want.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. So, because I was just gonna. Okay. So I'll talk about that in a second.
Awesome.
But so when I get what I have a file, obviously, so I'm going to be doing research into everything that's into the file, right? So I'm going to be looking at people who they've looked into and ruled out. I'm going to be looking into the place where something's happened. We're going to be pulling weather records. We're going to be pulling records on other things that have happened in the area. So for a case that we'll be talking about later, Ina Jane Doe, Susan Lund, we also looked pretty heavily into another major crime that occurred in the area, the murder of the Dardine family, for instance. And that's not so much to see if they're related, it's to get a sense for how crime is handled in the area as well. We're going to try and get a sense of place, who lives in the place. And from what I've learned about anthropology, that's pretty important as well. I'm going to start pulling local newspaper records. I'm going to find out where newspapers are held. I always want to find out where yearbooks are. So are they going to be held at the local library? Are the yearbooks going to be at the high school? Have they been scanned into classmates? I'm going to find out about, what I need to know about the Social Security Death Index. I'm going to get on Ancestry. So there's just a lot of different places I'm going to start looking to pull together information. Sometimes I need to get into the census records. So all that stuff is going to start being gathered together. And sometimes I don't know what I'm looking for until I find it. So this can be, poor Amy has seen my maze of folders of just tons of different stuff. I call it fishing is what it is. And sometimes I'll just have all these folders of information and I have to just kind of write through it to figure out what we might need. And then I will write a bunch of stuff and then she goes through and kindly comments that I have said a hand has the wrong number of bones in it or something. And then she leaves me a nice, extremely kind sticky note with a proper number. Or I've said that a bone of the neck I've accidentally connected it to the shoulder or something in the wrong place. And she'll leave me a nice note there, but we eventually get there. So that's how we kind of work on the writing and research process together. So it's very different than my academic research in that a lot of it's archival, but it's archival in a different kind of way, because we're often going to be doing research that's not directly related to the subject at hand, but we're going to be looking at different kinds of things that have happened in the area. Oftentimes, so if we're going to be looking at a decedent perhaps that has had some dismemberment involved, we're going to be looking at other crimes that are similar that have happened within a decade, within 4 or 5 or 6 states. So that's going to be a pretty wide kind of draw in terms of records. Were these cases solved or unsolved? What's the victimology? So that's all the kind of stuff we're going to be looking at in any particular case.
Yeah, and this individual that's here, interesting anthropology story, anthropology legacy story. This was a case that Laura asked me about kind of at the beginning of our friendship and partnership, and I got really interested in this. And through Laura, I learned about sort of this, very small but interesting subset of Doe's, living Does, and I never really thought about this before because we're anthropologists, we're dealing with skeletal remains, right? But Richland County Jane Doe was a living Doe. I mean, she's deceased now, but she was unidentified during her life. And legacy story is that she had a grand mal. She was transferred to state care. She couldn't tell anyone who she was, and she was never identified. She had a grand mal seizure, and following that, she died. But her remains. Later, I think there was a time gap, right, Laura? She was exhumed and the remains were studied by Dr. Ted Rathbun. I extra in there. So anthrop folks in the room, this is one of the original sort of forensic anthropologists when the academy, when our field first kind of named the academy. So that's sort of an interesting case, and luckily for us, the medical examiner or the coroner, sorry, in South Carolina, where this case is, still seems to be interested in pursuing this case. So Laura and I are hopefully gonna figure out maybe how to do this case.
Yeah, there are forensic anthros there, so that's really great.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Yeah.
So in the interest of time, I'm gonna fly through a little bit of these, Laura, unless you have anything to say on this one. But I would say, law enforcement. It usually, I don't usually send law enforcement an email because they don't answer them, and there's no way to find like an email address for a detective, right? Or it's difficult to. And so sometimes I like to do that because your emails, it's got all the credentials at the end and all that stuff. But as I've found, especially with smaller rural jurisdictions, that doesn't really, they're not going to read all those credentials anyway. So I usually just begin with a cold phone call and say like, hey, this is who I am. I'm not some charlatan. I promise to follow up with a couple links via email to past cases that had some media attention so that they can see that, I'm serious. And I usually reference both my credentials and Laura's credentials, but, I will say that we do have these kind of like read the room items where if the call is going really well and the detective or whoever I'm speaking to seems interested and is like, Laura's a really popular true crime podcast, or I might just leave that out because law enforcement is also suspicious of the media. I don't think this is news to anyone.
Yep.
So sometimes I try to get a sense of, how do they have a literacy around genetic genealogy. Should I mention this? Should I mention that some of our past case solves have been with genetic genealogists? Like, where should I go with that? Sometimes I just keep it really simple. Laura and I are, I would say, and I don't think I'm going to tell on her in any way on this one, I would say we're very nosy.
Oh yeah.
So makes good researchers and anthropologists be very nosy. So whenever we get the ear of somebody, we also ask about other similar cases in their jurisdiction. When we talk about Ina Jane Doe, we can explain that we also were interested in another case in that same county. You know, we think, well, while we're here and we've got your attention, like what else, you know, what other cases might you have that kind of fit what we're looking for, what we think our expertise areas could be lent well towards. And usually law enforcement at that point will share that information as well. Of course, you know, should I ask if they actually know where the physical remains are? Are they in an evidence locker? Are they at the ME's office? Are they buried? You know, the big one that I never want to hear, of course, is that they've been cremated, or the even worse one than that, they've been lost, right? So, of course, that happens. And sometimes they know kind of where they are, but they're not totally sure, or sometimes they're in some random place like the former coroner's basement, right? So all of you all in the room that have done work, you know, this that long postmortem interval, but these are kind of, this is sort of our initial pitch, and a lot of it is just like relating one-on-one to law enforcement so that they don't hang up the phone on me. Luckily, I'm from a very rural area in the Midwest, and I know enough about like 80s action movies and sports that I can kind of like BS a little bit, and that gets the foot in the door. And Laura has a very nice Southern accent. So between the two of us, usually we can at least kind of, you know, demonstrate serious, not annoying to you in any way, but we really want to work on this case, and here are the reasons we want to do it, and here's how we've been successful in the past, and here's what we think we can do. I will also say, and I think this is on the next slide, this is a good one for Laura to talk about, a lot of this comes at a financial cost to us. Right, so a lot of these cases that we're interested in are coming from jurisdictions where they don't have the money to spend for forensic testing. So Laura and I have kind of created with what we're going to do. But I think that I believe we're going to get to that on the next slide, Laura. So I'll turn it over to you for this.
I'm sorry, you froze for a second and I couldn't hear what part you were turning over to.
I was going to say, I think I think we'll get to the, you know, how we kind of wrangle the financial piece for the forensic testing in a couple slides, but I'll turn it over to you for this one.
Okay, just in terms of like building trust in non-traditional media, I mean, honestly, I can only speak to it from my personal experience, and having an EDU email sure helped me, you know? So, I mean, I did approach this as a professor. So would it have been harder if I wasn't a professor starting out? Yeah, I was in the English department, as we say, you know, English, but it's still helpful because it's, you know, an EDU. But I think that helped. I think having, you know, that sort of like serious, hey, I work for the state also kind of thing was very helpful for me. But, you know, that doesn't carry a lot of weight with families. And what families want to know is that you're going to treat their case seriously and with care. And so something that I did at the start with my podcast was that I worked with a licensed professional counselor, who is a really good friend of mine, and she does the family interviews, and that's because she's trained in grief and trauma, and so that's one thing that she's done. But in terms of the kind of work that you guys do and the kind of work that I do with Amy, I'm working with families post, you know, rather than pre. So we're going to be working with families post identification. So in a case that we're talking about in just a little while, how I build a relationship with families is fairly easy in terms of the initial, because they're relieved, sad, happy that an identification has come. But a big part of it is being scrupulous, honest, and available, and providing information as quickly as I can, answering emails, sharing media that I've gathered, you know, and just being careful about how I approach them, and trying to just give them as much information as I can in a responsible way. And that's how I build relationships with families. Law enforcement, being professional, Amy hops on the phone. She can do that because she has something that they want. I want something that they have. So I send them emails with all my credentials, links to coverage that I've gotten for cases, things that my case, that my coverage has managed for cases. And that works for me. Lots of little hyperlinks to things that I've managed. But you guys do work that people want done, so you have the upper hand there. Experts, I get my expert friends to introduce me. So I saw Dr. Goliath pop up a second ago in the meeting. I got Dr. Samantha Blatt to introduce me to Dr. Goliath. I got Amy to introduce me to Dr. Blatt. That's how it works, right? So one expert begets another expert.
I'll fly through this because a lot of this is going to be common knowledge for anthro folks, but just to sort of think our way through this, the challenges from the anthropology side. I mean, that Laura summarized her challenges like beautifully. I like, and it's so interesting because this, like the diagrams that Laura faces and that I faces are that I face are like quite different when we're trying to get a case, but we're always talking to each other about like how to manage it. What do you think? What should my tactic be here? So the challenges from the anthro side, of course, like I said, is the location of the remains, of the physical remains, or the radiographs. Even known, was the body cremated? Are the remains intact? Are they well preserved? Here's a big one that I haven't really had a lot of reason to think about until lately. Will the department release the remains out of state? Out of the case, we're fine with remains coming from Illinois to New Hampshire, but they didn't want me to fly with them, so I had to drive 18 hours out and back. Luckily, my family lives in Illinois, and I'm from Illinois, so I could combine that with a little field trip to see my family. Is there a case file the department will share? It's never been my experience that the departments are funny about this. I mean, they usually just give me everything, but maybe I just jinxed myself. If there's another anthropologist that worked on the case, are they still alive and are they willing to talk to me? This is popping more and more. We kind of see this shift from sort of like whoever is local and kind of sort of knows about bones, like maybe some random geologist at a university in like 82, they might have looked at remains. And then we see this shift, with the professionalization of our field with AFS, to like late 80s and into the 90s, that actual anthropologists are looking at these remains, and often that's in the case file. And a number of those folks are still alive and are fairly friendly. I'll reach out and say like, hey, we're doing a reanalysis, et cetera, et cetera. And recovery scene photos, if at all possible, we can understand why that is, and anything about circumstances of recovery. So I think we're like 10 after here, Laura, so I think we can probably do this in 10 minutes or less. We want to talk about this successful case collaboration. Did I do some weird, I guess I thought I had more bullet points there. So this individual, Laura and I were both really interested in. I'll say why I was, and Laura, if you want to think about it. I think that part of, looking at NamUs, looking at Doe Network, looking at NCMEC, or wherever you're kind of like doing some case research to see about particular cases that you're interested in. Now, of course, I'm talking about, these are the ones that Laura and I are going out and seeking. These are not the ones coming into my lab. The ones coming into my lab are from New Hampshire, right? And that's great. That's all well and good. And a couple of those are going to go to DNA Doe projects soon here, I hope. But we're very nosy, and we want cases outside of that are sort of matching our research interests. And so this is a case that I don't even remember exactly when I heard about this case, but it like really, really stuck with me. It probably is because this woman was recovered just a bit south of where I grew up. So very rural, very remote, very like, one stoplight, if anything, type of towns. And I was 11 years old when she was recovered. I remember like sort of a vague memory of hearing about this when I was getting into like true crime stuff as a teenager. I was still living in Illinois, but then of course I backburnered that. But this came across my desk again, within the past several years, because of the facial approximation and because of the facial reconstruction, which you can see the originals here at the bottom of the screen. Very sadly, these pop up on those what are used to on those websites like worst facial reconstructions ever, and you can see why. The one on the left is quite bad. I mean, neither are great. All right, well, I understand that, like, this was not going to get anyone identified, right? We've got this really fake looking wig and this really uncomfortable kind of to look at reconstruction. And I just remember thinking, like, man, this just feels not right. Like, not only is it not good, but it also, there was this like emphasis on the skeletal pathology that the woman had. And when I started looking into it, I thought, I mean, maybe she had that, or maybe this is super exaggerated, and that might be a reason why she's not getting identified. Is that in January 1993, two young girls were playing in this park in Southern Illinois, and they came across the decapitated head of this woman, and she was only a couple days estimated to be post-mortem. So could still tell the hair color. Hair was still attached to the head. Could tell the eye color. Facial features still intact or recognizable. Though she did have some blunt force trauma to the head, and obviously nothing was found below C. So I always had this in the back of my mind for the last couple of years, this case I was interested in. And so I don't actually remember, Laura, if I pitched it to you or if we just kind of...
We both knew about this case. Yeah, this is a case that I paid attention to for a long time because it always had floated to the top of web forums, and people had done a lot of research into Ina Jane Doe, and I had always felt that something was off with the research. And I know that when we talked about her case, you told me that you felt that she had perhaps been over pathologized in the original analysis, and that was a word that I didn't have, but it explained what was bothering me, and that it kind of immediately clicked for me because I felt people were looking for people that had perhaps been in a severe car accident or had some sort of severe trauma pre-mortem. And I felt like that research, although it was so exhaustive, that was happening online, was just kind of going in the wrong direction because her art had been so thoroughly circulated in the places where people look for missing people and look for unidentified people. I felt like if she had loved ones out there, they would have seen that art and identified her if it was accurate. And so I felt that if that case was not reanalyzed, she was simply not going to be identified. So that was my reasoning for wanting to take a look at her case.
Yeah, and I think adding on to that, we were both pretty, disturbed by some of the web sleuths conclusions that were being drawn. There was a direct line. And I'm sure this all still is. I don't think stuff ever really goes away. But there were a lot of people drawing the conclusion that she had some kind of physical disability, therefore she had a mental disability, therefore she had a caretaker who abused her, therefore, X, Y, and Z. And it just was it snowballed. And so Laura, I was thinking, if the skeletal part is wrong, then this is you're sending definitely the wrong message about the correlation between a physical condition and then going there. So I also had the suspicion that if her loved ones were looking for her, they were not seeing her in this reconstruction. So I placed a phone call to Detective Captain Scott Burge. He's now retired. And I called him about 6 months before retirement, and I said, hey, or I said, hello, may I speak to Detective Captain Scott Burge? And his exact words to me were, it depends on who's calling. And I thought, I like this guy, right? He was from Southern Illinois. I explained who I was. I explained what I did, and he knew immediately what I was talking about when I said Ina Jane Doe. This was a case that bothered him. He really wanted to see it resolved before he retired, but he was not actively working on it at all because there was nothing for him to really work on, right? They had no idea who the woman was. Really hard to do anything with perpetrators when you have no idea who your victim is, right? Also, as Laura alluded to earlier, there's another fairly famous case in this county, the Dardine family murders that are unsolved, and that took a lot of their investigative time in terms of the cold cases. So I had read there's an original JFS article by Linda Kleppinger and John Heidingsfelder, who is he's still working at the pathologist or the medical examiner's office in Evansville, Indiana. And Linda Kleppinger, of course, another famous forensic anthro. She's retired. She used to work at the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana. So there was an original article, and that is where we get the idea of this kind of like torticollis-like neck, Rhineck syndrome. But, if you actually go back and read that case report in JFS, they caveat this pretty heavily. They say it's a possibility, it could be, of course, that enters into web sleuths and Reddit forums as she has this, and then like non-scientists and non-medical doctors are making a mental interpretation from these physical characteristics. So this becomes pretty dangerous.
Can I add something on there real quick?
Yes.
I just want to say that can happen sometimes when people get a hold of like an anthropological paper or report. People will take out just the scientific language that you guys are so used to, and it becomes just case canon. And so the torticollis became case canon for Ina Jane Doe. So there was no probable about it. She was listed as a victim with torticollis. That was it. Like there was no probable ever included in discussions. So when we pulled Kleppinger's report, it was actually surprising to see, to us, at least to me, how carefully she listed that it was probable, possible, maybe, because I had always seen Ina Jane Doe listed as definitely having torticollis. So.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point, Laura. I mean, it's literally in the title of Kleppinger's article.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's also good. Larger issue of information, like I don't really know what torticollis totally is, and like all the the suite of symptoms and things too. Certainly some folks on Reddit probably are not taking the time to read up on torticollis, so it becomes this. Laura's totally right. It becomes case canon, and then people start to associate that information with things that don't go at all. Nobody with torticollis experiences like a particular mental disability suite of traits either. So it just sort of, it gets twisted into something that it never was meant to be. So quickly, June, July, May, sometime last summer, we flew out, or I drove out from New Hampshire to Illinois, and Laura flew to St. Louis, and I picked her up along with two of my students from UNH that flew out to assist us. And we drove from St. Louis to Mount Vernon, Illinois, to Jefferson County Sheriff's Office. We picked up the remains, and I was allowed to transport those back to the University of New Hampshire for extended skeletal analysis. Interestingly, we were there, we also the scene where Ina Jane Doe was recovered back in 1993. And so Laura this is important for Laura and for my research, right? Seeing like the context of where somebody was recovered, we got the sense of how big this lake actually was. We want to reiterate here that Ina Jane Doe's any post-cranial were never found, or if they have been found, they haven't been matched to her. And so we could probably talk all day, Laura, about like how scene context and actually going and visiting with the detectives really helped us with this case. Probably leave it at, this really put everything into perspective, like the recovery, the postmortem photos that we saw that were from the morgue, also from the scene photos, we were able to see, it's Southern Illinois in January. It's usually kind of snowy, but there was no snow. So this plays into the decomposition that we're seeing as well, or the lack of. So there was an incredible amount of compiled information in the case file, like big, shout out to these detectives that worked really hard on this case when they had compiled a ton of information. Postmortem photographs were in there. They had it was huge. Biggest case file I've ever seen. Lots of tips. They even went and pulled all the camping permits of everyone that was in the park at the time of Ina Jane Doe's recovery. There was a really detailed incident report. There was a very detailed pathology report. They had attempted the original forensic art, like we showed you. Pretty incredible. And there was a fair amount of media coverage. Laura and I started searching through databases, kind of as I was sort of doing the skeletal analysis, and Laura's on her end is sort of doing the database search, and I was doing my, as best as I can do. I'm not as good as Laura about this, but we were looking at who fits the bioprofile, so I did the bioprofile again, and we were just sort of looking at who fits this. Laura, I don't know if you want to quickly talk about that.
I don't know if we have time, so I think we have to go to the end. I'm seeing a time signal, so I think we
Sorry. Yeah.
No, it's okay. I'm almost done, I promise. Quickly, for throws, she had a silver point filling that you can see there on the top, a root canal silver point filling. So that gives us, that's a little bit older dental work. There's the original images from the JFS article that Cleppinger wrote. Dr. Samantha Blatt, our friend, we love her, from Idaho State. She did this beautiful dental thin section of one of Ina Jane Doe's teeth. And so we were able to consult with our friends, other experts, and look at how these features have been over-pathologized. So I'm doing genetic genealogy with the team at Redgrave Research. As Susan Lund, Laura secured Astrea Forensics for us. They produced a fantastic kit. When that kit came back and was entered into GEDmatch by Redgrave Research, they found a 432 centimorgan match. That was great. Like, that's a huge match. We knew they would solve it. They actually solved it in 6 hours. So big shout out for genetic genealogists working on your forensic cases if you're able to afford them. Incredible. We found out by her family, they were still looking for her. And so Laura has been working with her family. So I'll just leave it up on the case takeaways here as we field some questions.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So now we'll do Q&A. So I had Kat had her hand up, but I'm not sure if she still has a question. Kat, if you want to do your audio to ask a question, that you're welcome to, or you could put it in the chat.
Yes, thank you. Hi, can you guys hear me? Thank you. Amy, I wanted to know, I was looking at the notes when you guys were first introducing yourself, and you said you had academic pressure to stay in your lane. I'm a new PhD student, so I'm very interested in how you navigated that.
I will tell you, I didn't really have the confidence to sort of push and I wish that I would have done that in graduate school. But I did sort of find right that I should be a specialist in one thing. But it never felt, for me, that never felt like a good fit. That's not to say that my forensic anthro colleagues who specialize in one thing are doing anything wrong, right? They're great at it. I would say I'm more of a generalist. And so I think that that's like a personal, that's just a personal thing for me. I never felt that satisfied by focusing on one method and only doing that, or only going to one field site, or only doing one type of case. And so that, some people might say that that has resulted in like a more chaotic research is how I need it to work. And I explored that after I graduated. So, what I tell my students, and I don't have a graduate program, I just have, we're an undergrad only anthro program, but a lot of my students go on to graduate school, or they want to. And, I just think, like, as a graduate student, you're getting like this insane amount of information coming in, right? And it feels overwhelming, and it feels like sometimes like, oh my God, I have to pick one thing and be really good at it. And I think that to get your degree, you do, right? You still have to write a dissertation, and you should still be an expert in something. But I would say, like, to me, having keeping your head on a swivel for everyone else that's working around you, that's an expert in other things that you're not, like it sort of crystallized for me post-graduate school, like, oh, I need to be less focused on my one singular piece that I can add to forensic anthropology, and more focused on, for me, more focused on how to solve cases. So, like, dental histology is not going to solve a case. Like, it's going to contribute to a case, but if I'm really interested in solving identifications, right, like my method, I focus on field. So that's sort of where I sort of took this approach where I was like, you know what, I'm done with the lanes, I think. So, you know, it's not for everyone. And you know, if your advisors are saying, hey, you have to focus on this one thing and you just got to get through and get done, totally get it. That's what I did too. But if you're finding yourself kind of like, you know, this can't be it for me, there's a way to craft a really creative, fun career. Do it working with your friends, essentially.
Great. Also, we'll open it up to other people who might have questions. So there's a question in the chat from Liam Johnson. You might know him. He
Yes,
says,
we
great
know Liam.
talk. Thank you so much for your presentation. You mentioned some of the financial barriers or barriers in general going outside of your lane. Can you elaborate or expand on how to support these outside endeavors, both financially and with your time? So an offshoot of Kat's question.
Laura, do you want to take that one? Or?
Well, I think we'll have to split this one because we split the bill, don't we?
Yeah.
So we, I mean, time-wise, wow. I mean, there's never enough time. I'm always behind on one thing, you know? So I have to kind of choose which thing I'm going to be behind on, and that's just the thing I'm behind on at the time. Financially, Amy and I split costs. Is how we tackle it. We work with companies that apply for grants. We work with nonprofits that saves money as well, and she puts in lab funds, and I write, and the money that I get from writing, because a lot of the casework that we're doing is something that I'm writing about, so I put in my own personal earnings into that as well. So that's where at least my part of the money comes from. So that's how financially we are able to afford it. Combination of getting in on grants. I know Amy is able to contribute some lab funds. I'm able to contribute some money. Nonprofits, working with companies that are good folks who will make the cost as low as possible, because you know we're trying to do work on cases that are just not going to get addressed otherwise. So.
Okay. I think you just answered this in your response, but Kat had another question. Have you been able to use faculty grants? And you did say that you were using those.
Yeah, I mean, grant writing for forensic cases is difficult because granting agencies are going to be like, well, why doesn't law enforcement pay for their own cases? Which is a fair point. But you know, it's my experience. There's never anything a 2 to 3 person cold case team. So we're luckier than most states. We have a dedicated team, and they still have a budget of 10 grand a year. And that's honestly, I mean, that's like nothing in the whole scheme of things, right? So yeah, so I rely on some faculty grants. The majority of them that I apply to casework are internal. So anytime that my college of liberal arts has any faculty money up, I'm like, yoink, like let me, because I'm like $1,000 here, 500 here, 2,000 here, like I will take it all. I also now have a donation link to my fund, some rich benefactors up here in the Seacoast. You know, essentially just I'll talk to anyone. I'll talk to a wall about what we do. You know, I'll talk to anybody at all. I'll hand them a sticker. I think a lot of this is you know, it's just like keep talking to people about what you're interested in, and people will respond to it. And it's not hard to justify this work, right? Certainly it's okay for you know somebody to be you to be talking to that is like, oh, I'm not really interested in that, but really, like Laura and I don't have to justify the work that we do, and like so you know I wish I had a $300,000 grant to apply to this. I don't. We cobble together small funds here and there and work with nonprofits.
Right. Okay. Any other questions? We have about a minute left. Otherwise we're gonna wrap up. Any other short questions? All right, so let's see. Lots of praise in the chat. People are going to follow the podcast. You got new followers. No other questions? Then let's thank our guests for their time and expertise and great talk today. Thank you, Dr. Michael and Dr. Norton. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Esther, do you have the recording stopped?